Good morning, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this discussion about anti-Asian sentiment and mental health. My name is Shin, and I'm the CEO of the nonprofit organization called KACIE, which stands for Keeping All Communities Informed and Engaged. Mental health, this is a topic that needs to be talked about as much as possible, especially in the Asian communities, because there's also this certain stigma that exists that makes it very difficult for people who may be struggling talk about their struggles and seek help. As most of you probably know, the recent tragic news about the death of Stephen Twitch Boss, which brought mental health awareness into the spotlight again, prompting many to hold more discussions around mental health. But this really needs to be talked about all year long. And we need to try to normalize this conversation about mental health, especially in the Asian communities. Now, today's discussion is being held in partnership with the LA Civil Rights Department as part of the citywide anti-hate campaign, LA for All. And since the pandemic, we've seen a rise in anti-Asian sentiment. And today we wanted to focus on how all of this impacts the mental health of our young adults. What are some of the struggles or concerns within this age group? And even for the schools, do people have enough mental health support for this population? Are there challenges in seeking mental health support, especially due to these cultural stigma, which our special guest will be talking more about later a bit? And so these are just some of the things that we wanted to talk about today. And before I introduce you to our special guest speaker, I wanted to acknowledge some of our guests who I see are here with us on this call. We have our LA law enforcement expert, retired LAPD Deputy Chief Terry Hara, if you can wave to the crowd for us. I don't know if Tamlin's here yet, but we also have actor and community activist Tamlin Tamita, who will be joining us shortly as well. I think I see Margot. She's a lecturer at CSUN and coordinator for the Asian American Studies Pathways Project, Margot Gamboa Wang. Also, from Sahaas for Cause, that's a nonprofit organization serving the South Asian community. Payal Sahini, she's the president. I believe she's here as well. And I think I saw on the registration list someone from AAPI Equity Alliance who is here as well. So I look forward to meeting all of you later. We also have a number of students as well as other community organizations, even media on this call. So after we hear from our special guest, I'd like to open up the conversation to everyone on this call. And I look forward to meeting and hearing from all of you then. So let me introduce you to our special guest speaker today, who will talk to us about anti-Asian sentiment and our mental health. She is a licensed clinical psychologist who has worked in university counseling centers in California for the past 13 years. She currently works at Counseling and Psychological Services at Stanford University. And she's also the current vice president for the Asian American Psychological Association. She is Dr. Christine Catipon. Thank you so much for taking the time to help us lead this very important conversation. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I'm so happy to be here. And, I think for me, because of the recent experiences and events of our AAPI students, it's really important to me to be able to put information out there and let our young adults and our, entire AAPI community know that there is support and help. So as Cindy mentioned, I've been working in university counseling centers for the past 13 years or so. I was recently down south in LA and OC up until about 4 months ago when I joined Stanford. So I feel I can speak to the experiences of our students in California. When I was down south, I worked with a wide variety of AAPI students. And I don't think it's a coincidence that because I identify as Asian American, a lot of students tended to approach me for services because they felt like they could have somebody who understood their worldview. So, prior to the pandemic, I think I dealt with the typical normal college stuff like fights with roommates, parents not understanding, all of that kind of stuff, stress at school. But since the pandemic and since the rise of Asian American hate and prejudice, the students have been struggling a lot more with mental health. And I think the pandemic having isolated us and limited our abilities to cope. Maybe some of us used to cope by going to the movies or going for a hike with friends, and that just wasn't accessible to a lot of people anymore. So during the pandemic, I personally saw a rise in people utilizing the counseling center services because they couldn't not face their mental health concerns. It was like, okay, I am stuck at home without my friends, without my coping strategies, and it was coming full force. Because there's such a stigma around mental health with our Asian communities, it's actually quite common to have a lot of stigma against it. And so my colleagues and I at the Asian American Psychological Association are very much invested in saying, it's okay to talk about our feelings, even if that wasn't modeled to us, even if that wasn't demonstrated to us, because it's important for us to be able to work through things. And while our elders and ancestors did the best that they could with coping with emotions, their experiences are not the same for a lot of the college students that are here in the US. And so their concerns are valid. And during the pandemic and during the rise in API hate, the content shifted to more suicidality, to more hopelessness, to more worry and concern about their elders and their parents, because many of us live in a multi-generational household, and being afraid that they might somehow, expose their family members who have limited access to resources to the COVID virus. And then on top of that was the racial trauma that some of my students were experiencing. I experienced it myself in Irvine, which we sometimes jokingly call the Florida of Southern California. No offense meant, but it's a very conservative area. And I myself have been a target of conservative people, just for wearing a mask. So, I can handle it as an adult, but when my students were coming in and just saying, I'm afraid to walk around campus, I'm afraid to be out and about, a lot of the attacks happened in areas that I'm very familiar with, like Torrance is near my hometown. A lot of the attacks were happening in Berkeley, in San Francisco. And then even when a Filipino was attacked in New York, it hits us as a community, it hits all of us because can we be next? And so college students have so much to deal with already. It's so much different than when we went to college, and so to add on to that, to add on to the constant barrage of news and social media, highlighting all of the things that are happening to our community, it's no wonder that more people came to counseling. And, it's like, forget the stigma, I need help. And yet for a lot of our community, a lot of college students, that help isn't available. And it's really been a struggle. I understand the frustration with most campuses being understaffed and not being able to provide services. And in a way, I contribute part of that to okay, people who would normally not have gone to services are now going to it or needing it. And with the stigma lifting, the resources available are just not there. I'm so grateful that at Stanford, we've only had 1 or 2 days wait for people to come into our services. I love the way the system is set up, but other schools, other colleges and universities don't have that accessibility. So then what do our students do? So today I'm looking forward to the conversation of hearing, what our students are going through, what they're experiencing, the racial trauma that they're experiencing, not only at school, but in their community where they should be feeling safe. And, because we at AAPA actually helped fund a COVID-19 needs assessment where we interviewed 3,800 folks who identified as AAPI. And what we found, at least with the racial trauma, 3 in 10 Asians faced discrimination during the pandemic. 3/4 of Asian Americans believe the U.S. has become more dangerous for their racial ethnic group. And more than half were cyberbullied because of their race and ethnicity. And we know that our students are the ones who are experiencing that. You know, even in my past setting, the Zoom bombing was happening during healing circles for Asian American students. I mean, it's just awful that, you know, leaders have somehow modeled that it's okay to treat one another this way. And 72% of those who reported discrimination to stop AAPI hate, which is now I forgot the new name of it, but they endorse that discrimination is a significant source of stress for them. And, you know, I experienced this at Stanford. I experienced it in the UC schools that I went to, even though in Southern California, most of the students were students of color in the settings where I worked. And yet to face discrimination in that sense is also overwhelming. And, you know, of course, the political climate didn't help with leaders referring to, you know, the China flu and all of these terrible things. The shootings in Atlanta jarred me. I was bedridden for a week because I was so overwhelmed. And so when we hear these attacks on our community, I find it hard to believe that none of us would be affected. You know, so today I'm hoping that we can have a space to talk about those concerns, to talk about, you know, what we can do to help ourselves. And believe me, we are working really hard to try to find ways to provide support to our community because it's so important right now.
And this discussion is very important too, because we not only have students on this call, but we have people from the city, from the county, we have other community-based organizations, we have educators. So this will also be an opportunity for us to hear from the students and hear about the struggles, but also talk about how we can all work together.
Absolutely.
To really, you know, help the cause. Can you talk more about this mental health stigma in the Asian cultures? Because
Sure.
a lot of people in this culture, it's just, you know, we're not supposed to talk about it, which is why I host these conversations so we can talk about it.
Yeah. Well, you know, I know one particular part of it is, you know, most of us are raised to believe that our family is, you know, the hub of everything. And so to talk about concerns outside of the family can bring, you know, the possibility of shame toward the family. To, you know, because many of us, you know, are coming from collectivistic societies, and it's like, oh, anything that could possibly reflect on shame or losing face in these communities, you know, it's just not encouraged. Other times it's seen as a sign of weakness or a sign that we're crazy. And these are myths that we still struggle to challenge among AAPI students, at least the ones that I've been working with, because it's not that. I mean, everybody has struggles and everybody has different ways of coping with it. But what we found is, you know, as people hold in their feelings and they don't talk about things, that leads to other problems like physical illness, like more significant mental health concerns. Sometimes, at least for the Philippines where I'm from, you know, it's tied into faith and not being faithful enough, or not praying hard enough, or not having enough belief in God. So we have all of these factors that say it's not okay to talk about feelings, they don't exist, you're being weak. And, you know, if these are the messages that are passed down to us, especially if that's what worked in whatever countries our elders came from. But that's not the case here. Students are being exposed to more ideas, more influence from the American culture. And a lot of the stuff that may have worked in other communities where everybody had the same beliefs doesn't work here in a country where so many nuances, so many factors are being brought into play. And part of the reason I love working with college students so much is because it is the first time that they're really exposed to new ideas, but at the same time, that can cause a lot of distress because it makes them start to question, wait, everything that I thought was not the absolute truth. And that's where the stigma from mental health comes in. Like my family never talked about feelings. We were just yelled at if we cried because we were doing something wrong, and not that, I'm not trying to like badmouth people, but that's just the way they were raised. And so we have this like intergenerational message that's coming through that just doesn't work in a different setting like the US, and especially in college campuses where even though some of the parents may have gone to college, it is nothing like how it is now. I mean, I went to college in the late 90s. We didn't have computers, we didn't have internet, we didn't have social media, we didn't have all of the things, a significant number of things that are contributing to stress now. So to minimize college students' experience because we didn't have that experience, I mean, it's just frustrating to me, and it makes me even more invested in really trying to support students and like, no, your feelings are valid, and let's work through that in a way that's consistent with your values and your cultural expectations. But yeah, stigma is still something we're working with, especially when it comes to medication. And when it comes to medication, I'm all about, hey, physical health, you don't know to go to the doctor until you have symptoms, right? Like your arm hurts or something's bleeding. But mental health has symptoms too. Just because it doesn't show up on a lab result doesn't mean it's not valid. Sometimes the brain stuff is just not something you can test. So, are you going to deny someone with heart disease or diabetes medication if they need that to live a fulfilling life? Then why would we treat psychotropic medication the same way? Because also many of it, a lot of times, it's hereditary. So like, oh yeah, my whole family has anxiety. Maybe medication can help. So, it's about putting the message out there. It's about doing presentations like this that, are all about the stigma can stop with you. If you get the information and you share it, hopefully we can save a lot more lives.
What about also not just the culture, but people who may be considered, successful in their profession or academic?
Sure.
Those people also, they have that because of that expectation. It's difficult for them to also, right, acknowledge, reach out for help.
Yeah, like we're thinking about Twitch, which, his death was something that really devastated me. And a lot of my friends are in the dance industry. And so they were posting their pictures with Twitch and sharing their experiences. And, the thing is, it happens a lot at our universities. I mean, I work at Stanford, and we had a very publicized suicide earlier this year, which is kind of what led me to moving up north to support their mental health efforts. But the immense pressure that our students go through, not just at Stanford, but at all universities, it's like, my parents will never understand. This is the expectation. I think the high emphasis on achievement for a lot of AAPI folk is so devastating if they cannot meet those unrealistic expectations. And so we see an increase in suicide. We see the need to put up with the racial trauma or prejudice or racism that they're experiencing in some schools that may not have a large AAPI community, that they have to put up with all of this in order to meet that level of success. I see it in a lot of graduate students who go to psychology programs all over the country and being really frustrated with, where can I get support? Why don't I have people who understand my worldview? So the immense pressure of college students, I mean, especially AAPI ones, I feel like we've been significantly impacted so much by the pandemic, on top of all of the pressure, on top of the stigma of not seeking support, that it's just a really sad time for our college students. And now, everyone's coming back from the pandemic. People have forgotten how to be social. People are wondering why they can't pay attention. I mean, you've gone through a 3-year experience that is life-changing. So there's that on top of everything. So when we talk about racial trauma almost being like the tipping point, because it's not something that we can necessarily do because it's so systemic.
And yeah, especially with the college age group, because
Yeah.
a lot of people do social media now, and their public image is very
Oh,
very
yes.
important,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yeah. All of it is stressful. So
Right.
I hear that every
Exactly.
day.
And I think that, you mentioned Twitch as well, but it just kind of proves that, someone's smile or dance or laughter or public or Facebook post shouldn't really fool you, because
Right.
there could be something going on. That's why it's so important for us to encourage one another to continue to talk about these issues.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, I'd love to open up the conversation here. We, like I said, we have students, we have organizations, we have government folks too. But before anything, I know that we have some students on this call. I'd love to hear from the students first. Like, what are some of your thoughts, some of your struggles or experiences? I'd love to hear about. If anyone wants to go ahead, just open up your mic. You don't have to wait for me to call your names.
I was glad that Dr. Christine did talk about living in a multi-generation household because of how different it is. I live with before I moved out, I lived with my grandma, my dad, and my sister, and it was all very different, different views about mental health. My grandma never talked about it. My dad sometimes talked about it, and then whereas my sister and I were pretty much open about it. Also, before the pandemic, I didn't face too much racism. There were always like little remarks from people, and that's already me living in a community that's dominant in minorities. But after COVID, it was scarier. I did read in an article for school that AAPI hate has risen about 200%. That's like way over positive. And so that definitely did scare me a little more, especially being in a college I think the Asian population is one of the least amount there. So that was definitely something I had to be aware of, always be aware of myself. Not really walking around just comfortably anymore, just having to always keep an eye out, one earbud in. But yeah, I think the topic of mental health within the AAPI community is extremely important because I never really was talked to about it by generations older than me.
And I want to remind everyone, please go ahead and introduce yourself so we all know who you are before you speak. Sophia, want to introduce yourself too?
Yeah, I'm Sophia. Right now I'm interning for KACIE. I'm currently a college student. I'm a third year at Cal Lutheran.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, Sophia. Are there any other students that want to share, or anyone else that wants to share their thoughts, or even information about the services that they may provide too?
Daniela's comment in the chat. Absolutely. I think it's so important to have spaces where we can talk. And I know one of the spaces that, or not one, but we have multiple spaces. We have drop-in groups at Stanford where I specifically focus on drop-ins for the college students who identify as AAPI. We also have them for Latinx. We also have them for Black students. And then we also have process groups for AAPI, Latinx, and Black students. We have 3 actually, because it's Stanford. I'll just, let it go from there. But I agree, Danielle, it's so important to have spaces. And if your school does not have a space, talk to the counseling center, talk to the, student affairs, because many times counseling centers don't know what the students want or need. We can try to guess and we can try to offer it, but I think we mostly do want to hear from you. So if you're feeling like the school could benefit from a space, especially around discussing racial trauma and experiences, please do talk to your counseling center or someone, because I'm pretty sure most schools have a counseling center and they can help, create that if there is a need, but we need to know what the need is. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much. Also, I spoke with Margot from CSUN before over the phone, and you guys were talking about as educators, when you have to make a report on behalf of a student, that you also go through some struggles too. Can you share with us that?
Hi, everyone. I'm Margot Gamboa Wong. I'm a faculty for the Asian American Studies department at CSUN, and I'm also the faculty coordinator of the Asian American Studies Pathways Project. And yes, as I was talking to Cindy, in the past year, we've had to deal with some anti-Asian events that have happened on campus, right, against students. And one of our biggest struggle was, just the whole reporting issue, right? Because you never want to pressure students that are not comfortable, but especially when they've been assaulted, you want something done about it because you don't want someone else to suffer, right? And we had an incident where, it took a while for the student to report. And even when the student reported, I think one of the hardest things was just the way the system worked, right? The way that the students were interrogated once upon reporting, right? And and the way that they're asked, or the way that they're questioned, and just also, I was hoping that I would become part of the conversation, because I was the one who kind of, I was the one who was there trying to kind of hold the student's hand through the process. But as soon as it was like pushed over to the next level, I was suddenly, not part of the conversation anymore. And so it was hard for me to advise the student, right? And I think that, I brought this up to Cindy because I feel like in all of this mess, that's another thing that creates more trauma and anxiety, right? When, you already feel, you're already a victim, you already feel traumatized, and then you have to go through this process, right? And I feel that that's like one thing for us at ASPP. That's one of the things that we're really trying to create, to make a change at CSUN. Is one of my interns is actually in the audience, right? Micah is here. Micah, do you want to share your experience?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Definitely. Good morning, everybody. My name is Micah. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a senior intern at the Asian American Studies Pathways Project at Cal State Northridge, and Professor Margot Gamboa Wong is my faculty moderator. And yes, this brings up, this, eventually leads up to the bigger picture of the discussion of like what policing looks like amongst our communities, and the systems in place that are like set up for us to report these kinds of incidents and crimes, and how like uninvolved our community gets once the police get involved, especially with the rise of anti-Asian hate and like the signing of like the Stop AAPI bills in LA County, that quite essentially just only increased police surveillance in our communities without increasing like community support and like support for already existing infrastructure and like this community, alternatives to policing. And in a campus where I'm sorry, and on a campus where we have a very like present police like service like roaming around, like why do our students feel victimized when these tragic events happen, and are scared to tell our like police officers on campus what is going on behind that, and why aren't we doing anything about it? And that's what we do here at Asian American Studies Pathways Project, to provide a holistic alternative where communities can like self-sustain ourselves without the dependence on the police infrastructure that we do have.
Thank you for sharing that. Terry, did you want to chime in about this?
Yeah, Terry Hara, retired from Los Angeles Police Department of about 35 years. And I've seen a huge dramatic change over the years in a sense of, and I can only speak because of one agency that I have been a part of for so many years. But I do believe that as an agency, as a public service agency, the agency itself, whether it's within the city, whether it's for college or the community it serves, has to be also has to understand their clients, has to understand the people, the public they serve. We've had, if you look back in 1980 when I joined, the population within Southern California, within Los Angeles, has changed dramatically with needs, new needs, and that an agency that is quasi strict in discipline also has to change internally, policy-wise, to reflect the new services that are needed within society. I think openness, even more so today, to be able to speak openly and feel that the community is being heard is paramount, no matter where you go throughout the nation. And I have learned that it's okay that if I think that the idea of being more sensitive or being more compassionate, as opposed to what at my time that I grew up was just the facts, non-emotional. I think there was a perspective of if you didn't show emotion and you can just get your business done, then you're doing your job. But I think over time, as society evolves and continues to change and grow, that our demand for policing or services also has to change. And with that, sometimes in many cases, a large organization or small, but when it comes to public service, it is not always at a contemporary pace where it could potentially be more effective. And so in listening to just a couple of comments or speakers, I think, and in law enforcement's aspect, training is always an important component to be able to introduce new techniques and new approaches. As a perfect example, when I introduced training on the spectrum scale of autism, you would think, because a lot of the behaviors or silence can be misinterpreted by law enforcement, and when they're initially trained, they only know what they know. But if they were taught and continue to be taught new things and new skills and problem-based solving, I think you'll get at the end of the result, better service for what the people are looking for. In regards to autism, we had law enforcement attend just one day with the parents of individuals who were afflicted by this situation, and they saw amazing things happen with their loved ones in approaching the police. When the police became open and understanding of what to look for and what to see and how to ask, how to approach, as opposed to a one way that most of us see through TV of being that very strict, stern, and just answer yes or no questions. You have to be sensitive. You have to be agile. You have to be understanding. And with that, the takeaway from the law enforcement participation in that type of training, they walked away and said this was the best training that they've ever experienced, because it hit home. many of the officers understood if it wasn't within their family, or they knew somebody, they knew a friend, they knew a loved one going through the same thing, that they have a better understanding after being shown how they can still do their job with a better understanding of the public they serve. So I think the same thing goes for AAPI, the issues of hate crime, hate incidents. We have to have an understanding, not just within law enforcement, but for the community at large, and to swim against the tide of social media and disinformation and strong people who have or strong opinions that may not always be correct. We have to still be vigilant and be mindful and to listen, to understand, and most of all, be respectful.
Absolutely. And I'm so happy that you mentioned the training about autism too, because I myself have a son who has autism, and I completely understand firsthand that some of the actions or the way, you know, perhaps a child or an individual may respond or act may be very different, you know, from the norm. So I think that that's very important that I know that you led that training back then as well. And I think that especially for the cultural differences too, there are certain ways that people may respond or not respond, right? So I think that's very important for everyone to understand that. But also, I mean, do you think that like even school police should be going through some type of training too, so that like what Margot was saying, that people don't feel, you know, intimidated or as if like they're being doubted?
Yeah, I think particularly and on our topic of students, college students, the young adults that are going through a time period in their life that will have variations of change and being confronted on issues or being just challenged on things that you want to be able to feel comfortable to approach whoever that is, whether it's staff within the university, college, or the police itself. And I wholeheartedly support training and understanding of law enforcement on campus to understand what needs to occur and have a better understanding of the topic itself by professionals who would be able to come in and provide ongoing training to law enforcement's job in how to serve the public. It's not law enforcement having any sense of power, but it's about we are public servants for the community, for the student body, for those that are attending to receive education. But that goes hand in hand with law enforcement service to students to be provided the education and the understanding and the skills necessary to how to ask questions when somebody becomes a victim or assaulted, or even who has an inkling that there's a possibility that something just occur. I don't feel right. I have this sense within me that I don't understand it. And you want the public to be able to feel comfortable that they're going to be received seriously and compassionately, particularly when it's somebody of a public servant to serve the community. So training is very, very important, ongoing training.
Right. And I think that just really depending on the topic or the issue, because I also do a lot of prevention work in child abuse, and we had talked about how, I was working with one of the organizations, and it's the Children's Advocacy Center. And we were talking about how, they were conducting training for LAPD and other law enforcement agencies as well about interviewing child abuse victims, because there are certain ways or a certain language that you should or should not be using, because a lot of the times it'll end up intimidating a victim. So we had talked about that as well. So I think training is very important, and hopefully even school police. I don't know what it's like for all the campuses, but hopefully this type of training and like open conversation does occur. And Sophia, I think you raised your hand. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, my dad.
I do, Cindy. Hi, thanks. I want to, thank the guests, of course. I mean, this is such a wonderful thing. We never had this growing up. We may have had counselors, we may have had, spiritual advisors, and most of the time they were brought upon us by our parents, force fed into us. I really like this platform. I really like the initiatives that KACIE and Cindy, and the team are doing right now. It does, give me, some sense of pride too, that, the community, Terry mentioned community, and I like community starts, first within yourself, and then of course, the closest people around you, which is the family. Because this forum right here is more consists of a lot of students. I want to encourage, the students, don't hesitate, talking to your parents, to the adults in your family. Our generation, I think we've become more open, talking to people, talking to our kids. Although although we were not very communicative with our parents and vice versa, our parents not to us, I think we've come to a point where, I think we're called the I love you parents, right? This generation, we're pretty much the first generation to say I love you to the kids a lot. And I think that, that says a lot about, our generation, and hopefully how open we are into listening, right? I mean, Terry also alluded to that. It's the listening part of it. I like the fact that my kids can talk to me. They talk a lot, definitely. But there are some topics, definitely some sensitive ones that we've tackled, and I have support as well, my wife, that, that helps. Bottom line, we're here to listen, and don't hesitate to start a conversation. And, I like the fact that, even if it's sensitive, my kids can come to me, and I'm hoping that, they feel the same way.
Thank you so much, Rico, for sharing that. And I think that's very important for parents and children to have this type of open communication. And in a way, because of, I don't know if it's a culture or what, but I think a lot of kids may actually not feel as comfortable, going out because they don't have a cool dad like Rico. So I'm just kidding. But I think that also, in a way, it's important to have these types of conversations with a lot of parents too, to let them know and kind of let them know that they also need to be open, right, and receiving and welcoming this type of conversations from their children as well. So thank you so much, Rico, for sharing that. I know that Sahaas, for Cause, you wanted to say a few words too and share some of your thoughts about the South Asian community. Want to go ahead and unmute?
Yeah, hi. Hello, everyone. I think it's an amazing forum, and I am, again, I love the concept that there is actually an open dialogue and people are talking about it, and my kids growing up will get much better opportunities. And I do also have a kid who has special needs. So just being a mother of a special needs kid, as is, I think, we are viewed a little differently, and then being a South Asian, I think, adds on to that. Again, a great opportunity, but as representing the South Asian community here, it's been 16 years I've been in this country, and I did ask Cindy this question in the chat. I do want to know your perspective as why are South Asians considered different than Asian community? I have still not understood this concept. Asian food is not like Indian food is not Asian food. I'm like, where do we come from? Kind of thing. And as you said, even in schools, and I mean, like, it's all every kind of maybe the vocabulary is not right, but discrimination or things, right, related to the smell of the food or the how the kids get conscious and they cannot represent their culture as openly as we would like to, right? All our big festivals, we would like the kids to wear our clothes or, things like that. But the kids are conscious, even if there is a good percentage of South Asian kids in that school system. So as you all being professionals and people who have seen different kinds of societies, I do want to ask you, what is your perspective of considering South Asians as Asians? And the students, like Sophia, we're talking about, I know we are talking especially about college campus, but even high schools and places like that, what do you suggest would be a good way to start to educate the parents and the kids to just be proud of who they are?
Can I speak to that? I would love to. Well, first of all, thank you, Aditi, for bringing this up. I agree with you. And I also agree with your comment, like there's a certain level of success and people don't see that. I think a big part of it is because Asians are seen as a model minority. However, only East Asians are really falling under that category. And so when we talk about the brown Asians, like the Southeast Asians, like the South Asians, we're not often considered part of the Asian community, or we are just kind of lumped into, oh, you should be fine. You have all of these privileges, and that is not the case. I do think that the education system in the US only focuses primarily on East Asian history. And I think because Southeast Asian history is limited to like us being colonized, or South Asian history has not really been, at least from my remembering, not really emphasized or focused on in learning about history and world cultures. So I think it's a real disservice that a lot of people are not aware of what constitutes an Asian American. And so I don't know if there's any particular thing that can be done because it is a systemic issue. However, I would like you to know that AAPA now has its first South Asian president in its 50-year history. And so that was a huge, and she's one of my dearest friends. So I love being vice president to her president. And, as part of our organization, we are really trying to uplift a lot of the underrepresented Asian communities. So we have divisions that emphasize, well, it happens to be DOSA, but it's like Division on South Asian Americans. We have Southeast Asians, we have, LGBT, we have multiple heritages, because we acknowledge that, our community is so large. And we can't be lumped into one, other people try to lump, all of these different countries into one, because organization and categorization is the only way people seem to want to understand. So that's where I'm thinking it's coming from. And I think it requires a lot more sensitivity and inclusivity in schools to acknowledge the definition of Asians. And before I forget, I also wanted to go back to, Margot's comments, because and Rico's comments, because I appreciate, Rico, that you are, open to having these conversations. And the reality, sadly, is that a lot of my students do not have that. And then when it comes to reporting and everything, I think a lot of faculty have consulted with us. We're like, I don't know what to do with this for the student. I think it's really important to be aware of what the students' needs are, like you mentioned. Sometimes I think it's important to have them be in a space that's confidential and can be held so that they have the space to process what their next steps are. Because if the first step is, I'm not sure if this is a crime and, maybe I need to think about it more, being able to talk to, confidential services like at the counseling center can kind of help you pick apart and just kind of ground yourself and support you so that you can make the right decision. And then we can also always send you to the resources that would be helpful. But I think with faculty I think it should be discussed with students. There is a procedure that needs to happen when the school gets involved. But if you go to your confidential sources, there's a little bit of wiggle room there, because we're not allowed to disclose anything unless it's suicide, homicide, or abuse or neglect. for certain populations. So, know that that's a space. And then if, I personally did a lot of training in the past for faculty, like this is how you help a distressed student. And so for faculty members who are here, whether it's high school or college, if that training hasn't happened, I hope that you can ask for that, because it is a lot to hold a student while they're in distress. And, it's a lot for them, it's a lot for you. So I do think that more training needs to happen just to support all of us, because we're all part of this experience. Because I know I personally feel hurt when a student comes to me and tells me what they experienced, in terms of racial trauma. It hits me too, because, there's something about our community that feels very collective. If it happens to one of us, it happens to all of us. And that includes people who aren't recognized as easily as Asian. So thank you, Aditi, for mentioning that. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. I think we just need to start early. Ignorance is what is the reason, and definitely so our kids don't have to face it in college if we start early.
I actually, Aditi, I actually want, firstly, thank you, Dr. Christine, for the advice about, how to handle reporting. And Aditi, I actually wanted to address your question, because that is something that this year is a great big focus for us in ASPP. During our Meet the Clubs event, we had several DESI American students approach our table asking, like, is there a DESI American club, right? And there are none, right? There were none active at CSUN. And I think that, a lot of the kind of misconception or the exemptions, right, has to do with the fact that it's, firstly, there is a political, right? There was a political kind of underpinning for why Asia has been divided the way it's been divided, right? I mean, kind of like, the Middle East, for example, is never, people forget that the Middle East is part of Asia, right? But, definitely our South Asian population doesn't get that much notice, right? And so for us, and I just want to share this because it's not that it's going to be like a miracle work, but for us at ASPP, one of the greatest things that we are kind of working towards is instead of using the term AAPI, we've moved on to using APIDA to stand for Asian Pacific Islander and DESI American. We use that so that it is more inclusive. And this year, we worked so hard to be more inclusive in our events, so much so that and Micah can actually share about this. We had a Diwali event to celebrate Diwali. We had a Garba night, right? And we have every Tuesday a Bollywood night, right? And these are just essentially the whole purpose for these events is for our DESI American students to kind of find just community, right? It became like, it was amazing in the sense that like there were so many students that came and they were all in dress, right? In formal Indian dress during the celebration. And it was like, they all found each other, right? And so one of our interns actually is kind of starting an organization, right? And I'm sharing this because I think that like for those of you who are students in this, in this meeting right now, it's small pockets, right? You can start it yourself, right? ASPP is a student initiated, it's a student-led program. Yes, I'm faculty coordinator, but the students are the ones creating these programmings. They're the ones that have like created all of this awareness on campus, and it is amazing what students can do, right? And so, to be more inclusive and to recognize all of the pocket, all of the different Asians that are on campus, right? It starts with just a small group, kind of creating that, like recognizing that, we are all part of, right? I know, Micah, did you want to share anything to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I think being involved in like the planning and like the creation of these like more DESI American South Asian events. Myself, I'm not South Asian, but being able to connect with an underserved population on campus, like I was really able to see how necessary just like the groundwork of like communities is to like a student body that doesn't have as big of a population or social presence as any other Asian American population on campus. And I think it's important that when we do talk about Asian Americans, that like South Asians are always involved. And because like you recognize, like sometimes and a lot of times they are left out of the conversation, and a lot of the problems like that we identify with the lack of social and like organizational structure, or let alone like just community structure on campuses, is a shared experience. And that's what Pathways really exists to provide, alternatives and like this more grassroots social, and on top of greater organizing events between these communities that feel underserved. So yeah, I really echo what Professor Gambo Wong said about, if you're a student and you see a need in something, like you have so much power, you have so much ability to make it happen yourself. And if not by yourself, like you have the power to organize amongst yourselves with your community. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mika. Thank you so much
for that. Also, Sylvia, I know that you introduced yourself in the chat group. Did you want to say a few words too and share what you do?
Hello, everyone. My name is Sylvia Gonzalez Youngblood. I'm a Ohlone Mission Indian in Chicana. I'm a United Mental Health Promoter, community health worker with the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health. So thank you for sending out the information to this discussion today, and happy to be here listening to what's on the hearts of the students and the solutions that are being presented today. That's part of the work that I do, as well as other mental health promoters in the Department of Mental Health, is we engage community where they're at, cultural needs, access to mental health resources and services and supports to promote mental health and wellness and spirituality, and really connecting culture basically with the science of mental health. And really wanted to be a part of this, just to hear, what I have children of my own, ranging from, and you all are not children, you're young adults, ranging from 33, 34 to 21, and to have a lot of talks with them, but I like to hear, from other youth as well. So I really, I do have one thing, if it's okay to ask a question to Terry. Is that okay to ask a question? You mentioned with the policing on campus, and educating and the empathy with the youth on campus and with students at large. And then I also heard how students feel when they kind of bring issues that arise, whether it be with racism or other incidents, about being believed with police and staff. Is there anything that's given to community on the campus that kind of explains the process? Because I think sometimes if something happens and we report, we want action, and kind of like the process of innocent until proven guilty, and even though something has been done to a person, it's alleged until the point that it can be proven, so that people don't feel like they're not being believed. They understand the process, that doubting someone as a victim is not the case. It's just how the process has to move through. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the I don't know how it is at the university level, but I know within LAPD's organization, there's a website that you can go to, that the public can go to, that will offer definitions of hate incidents, how to report it, and other than just within the city, but other resources, nonprofit as well as government resources in different languages. There are public service announcements as well in various languages within the LAPD's website that the public can go to. I would hope that other local jurisdictions would have a similar online information on how to report and what the definitions are and how to approach those that are inquiring about being able to report an incident or the crime itself, that would put them at ease. Okay, here's the process, and here are the various numbers that are available for them to call, as well as if there's a language barrier or an issue, that there's the ability to have translation that comes with the inquiry, or for those that are seeking the service.
Thank you.
It also sounds like it's outreach, right? Bringing resources to schools, and some of the things that KACIE also does too is we bring resources to the different communities. But I think that this could be great for us to try to work with schools as well, to try to bring the resources and the right people to come in and even do presentations. I think Erica's with the LA City Attorney's Office. Did you want to say a few words too?
Yes. Hi, Cindy. Thank you for this great presentation. Our focus, we work with K through 12 schools. I know we've talked a lot about college campuses, and I recall there being, whether counselors or mental health providers that were definitely available at the college level. That was a long time ago, but I know that they're still there. I don't work with college students, but I wanted to just talk a little bit about what I'm seeing at the K through 12 level. I think pre-pandemic, as you all know, there was definitely a need for mental health services. And I think after COVID, I think it just put a spotlight on the problem. And I think now there's a lot of focus and attention on something that was a problem way before COVID. So I'm glad that it's now become a priority for a lot of folks to focus on. But what I'm seeing is now that there's more conversation around mental health, parents are seeking in some cases mental health services for their children, or we have better ways to probe and ask questions about kids to have them open up about the fact that they might need mental health services. And what I'm seeing at the K through 12 level, we refer kids and families to mental health services. And I'm going to be honest, families are being told that, the wait list is 3 to 5 months. That is the reality of what I'm seeing on the ground, is that kids are being put on wait lists. That's very concerning, because kids who are in elementary, let's say you have a 5th grader, 6th grader, 7th grader that's struggling. Kids that are in those teen years, as you guys know, those are very crucial years for children. And it's impacting their engagement at school, their attendance at school. And so there's a crisis right now that I see. I know that a lot of some schools will have a psychiatric social worker on campus, but not all schools have one, as you all know. And so what I'm seeing, boots on the ground, my team, we're at these schools all over the city of LA, and there is an epidemic and a crisis, and it's very, very concerning for me. Just kind of wanted to, not that I have an answer. I think at the end of the day, it comes to money. It comes to prioritizing kids' mental health. And if we're really serious about it, I think every school should have a psychiatric social worker on campus. Even the ones that do have a psychiatric social worker, they're staffing a couple of schools, so their caseload is 200-300. that's just kind of like a number that I'm throwing out there because I heard it from one of the psychiatric social workers. So just wanted to shed light a little bit about what we're seeing at the K through 12 level. And it's extremely concerning for me because unless the cases involve like a child who maybe is suicidal or hurting themselves, or, you know, in those cases, they will get help, but I've even seen them being hospitalized and then released and then put on a wait list for services. So just wanted to share, you know, a little bit about what I'm seeing. And not that I have an answer, but I definitely think speaking about it, shedding light on the issue, I think we need to really push our elected officials to put money and fund this very important need of students. Just as important as a teacher. I mean, I think that having a psychiatric social worker on campus is very, very important.
Thank you so much, Erica. Sylvia, you wanted to say a few words too?
Yeah, if it's okay if I speak on that. I also am a disability rights and educational advocate. I have all my 4 children had specific learning disabilities. My 3 boys were on the autism spectrum, and one of them had ADHD bouncing off the walls. Any child, the schools have a obligation to child find. I speak of 30 years of learning the education system and education law. They have an obligation. That is a federal law. If there is a child in need, they have an obligation to refer that child for an assessment. Doesn't mean that a parent can't do it. Once a parent has identified a need and makes a request to the school, by law, they have 15 days to respond, either yes or no. And if it's no, then there's another recourse. If it's yes, they have 60 days to assess. There is no such thing as a waiting period. So if that's what you're being told, they are not in compliance.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I think you're talking about a learning disability.
No, this is mental health. This is children who have a need for services in the K through 12 system. I would suggest there's a really good free training that can give you the tools to be able to kind of get more familiarized with how that all works in the K through 12 system. It's Tiger Advocacy with Learning Rights Law Center. It's completely free, and it's a really good service for parents to be able to learn advocacy skills, education, the law, how all of that works. Mental health is part of services and supports in schools. And you're right, if kids do not get those services and supports, those mental health services and supports through their K through 12 academic years, once they graduate and they go on to post-secondary education in life, it will be more challenging, and those needs will just be exacerbated in post-secondary life. And speaking specifically with the Asian community, their needs are the greatest because the schools, like someone just mentioned, you're okay, they're fine. Their parents don't need it because they'll get tutors. They will, they'll address it. They have the money to do it. They have the resources. And that's not the school's business. The school's business is to find the need, address the need, provide services. It's called an offer of FAPE, a free appropriate public education, once they've been identified to have a need in the K through 12 system. And I've helped many Asian American, Asian families with their advocacy in schools, and this is the battle that they are having to overcome. And unfortunately, in San Gabriel Valley, there have been some students here who have committed suicide because of that. And it is. Thank you for bringing that up, because I think that's that youth didn't have the opportunity to even make it to post-secondary life and education, and it breaks my heart. So please, no waiting. There are no waiting. That is not in compliance with the law. Just tell a parent to request to the school, assess my child for mental health services. I believe they have a need, and it is impeding on their educational benefit and progress in their ability to succeed and to advance forward. You just got to have the right lingo in order for them to kickstart. So sorry for taking up too much time, but that special education and yes.
I have 2 kids with disabilities, so I completely understand.
You're a sped mom too, then.
I understand that, and also it's the the Asian communities. There are a lot of parents who English isn't their first language, so I think that it's very important for everyone to have these types of resources. I think Joyce Ma also asked that question in the chat box, if you can put that resource in the chat box, but also where can people go for information like this about their rights?
They're right. Tiger Learning Rights Law Center. If you just Google that, they have a tiger advocacy program. And there is also the Brun, it's called the Brun Academy. They just started their, it's with the college, and they just started a whole advocacy training that's going to span over, I believe, 12 weeks or so. I can put that in the chat as well if I can find it really quickly. But yeah, and then also Disability Rights California. They can also put you in touch. There's also TASK. The acronym is TASK, T-A-S-K, Team of Advocates for Special Kids. They do free trainings and different type of presentations. They do them all the time, and they do them virtually. And then also there are parent empowerment centers, parent training centers, and parent resource centers that are scattered throughout California, and every area is supposed to have them. And at the school base, the special education director, they should be providing trainings to school, and then also the SELPA directors. And SELPA is an acronym, S-E-L-P-A, for Special Education Local Plan Area. That'll be an office within your district, and there'll be a director, and they are required to educate and train parents in their SELPA, which could consist of one district or multi-districts. But yeah, those are the resources at the local level. But
Now,
as many as I can, I'll put in the chat.
Is this just for special education, or is it just, for information on mental health in general? What are the rights?
For mental health, that'll be in there with it's not necessarily special education, it's just disability rights. And within the disability rights, the mental health rights are in there as well.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, it's one and the same.
Thank you so much. And if you could put that in the chat box for everyone, that would be great. And I think there was someone that wanted to share as well. Did I get everyone that raised their hand? Any other questions, or anyone that wants to share about your programs or concerns?
I just Cindy, I just wanted to add to what Erica was saying. As a PTA mom, right? I'm part of the PTA board, and I think one of the sad things right now that's happening to the K-12 is that like our school, we have the funding to hire a school psychologist and a school social worker, but we haven't been able to because of the great shortage, right? And so it's like, even when you have funding, trying to find folks who would be able to serve the position. And so, and then, and I wanted to, share that because there are, potential students here who might be interested in the field, right? There is a great need. There is a great need everywhere. At CSUN, it's the same thing. We have a great need, right? I also work for the Educational Opportunity Program. And because of the type of students that we have in that program, my first generation, historically poor students, we try to have like a special counselor, right? A counselor that will specifically speak to students because of their experience. And even that, right, we had a hard time hiring a counselor for EOP students, right? It's just, I think that, there's just a great lack right now. And I think that that's something that hopefully, eventually will get filled. But I think that that's one of our sad realities is we are now more mental health aware as a society, but we don't have the folks that will help guide us, right, into that mental, to be mentally healthy, right? We need more of those folks.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. Are there any other questions? Anyone that wants to share anything else? I know SIPA, you wrote something too. SIPA is it's a community organization that serves the Filipino community. But yeah, they shared their information in the chat group as well, their contact information. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. I think I got everyone's questions and comments. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. We'll also be having an event on the same topic for seniors at the San Fernando Valley Japanese American Community Center on January the 25th. So please stay tuned for that. Follow us, KACIE, on Facebook and Instagram at KACIE Nonprofit for any updates on our events. And KACIE is also going to be launching this new initiative called Smile Say Kimchi, which we will, through the sharing of food and culture, bring people from all walks of life to bring more awareness and discuss important issues to the AAPI community, such as mental health, disabilities, and anti-Asian hate. So we're very excited about this, and we'll be having many discussions like this and events throughout the year in the various communities of Los Angeles. So hopefully I can also partner up with you guys who are here for our future events. And of course, thank you, LA Civil Rights and their amazing executive director, Capri Maddox, always for your support, friendship, and partnership. You will be getting a pop-up message about a survey immediately after I close this meeting. So please give us your feedback so we also know what more we can do for you and what other topics that we can bring to you in the future. Let's continue to talk about mental health. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Happy holidays. Thank you.